And we're back with another Renters' Rights Bill podcast as a special, where we're going to talk about the end of fixed term tenancies in detail. So I'm joined again by Simon Joyce, Annie Cope, my esteemed colleagues at Cope & Co. So we're going to start off as usual. We're going to play a video which is factual about what's going to happen with the end of fixed term tenancies. And after that video, we're going to have a chat about it regarding the sort of practical implications and what it actually means in the new world of the private rental sector. So let's crack on with the video. In the first video, I looked at the abolishment of Section 21s. Now, running alongside this will be the end of fixed term tenancies. Firstly, just a quick explanation of what a fixed term tenancy is. It's basically an agreement that lasts for a specific pre-agreed period, commonly for 6 months or 12 months. Now, during this time, both the tenant and the landlord are bound by the terms of that particular contract, meaning that the tenant can't leave and the landlord cannot ask them to leave unless there is a breach of the agreement or indeed by mutual agreement. Now, at the end of the fixed term tenancy, the tenancy can do one of three things. It can be renewed for another fixed period. It can be terminated if either party gives the proper notice, or it effectively can roll over into a periodic tenancy, which then continues on a month-to-month basis. Fixed term tenancies have traditionally provided a bit of certainty for landlords and tenants, setting clear start and end dates. However, they will be no more. Instead, tenancies will default to open-ended, essentially periodic agreements from day one, which will require a minimum of 2 months written notice from a tenant to end the tenancy. Now, this notice can be given at any time from the start of the tenancy, even strangely on day one. Which obviously will be very exceptional. Now, importantly, this transition will take place in one stage. Now, in legislations of the past, there has been a period where we can get used to the legislation and we have a cooling off period, if you like. However, with this one, on the date that the bill becomes law, all fixed term tenancies in England will automatically convert to periodic tenancies, and any new tenancies that are created after D-Day, as it were, will essentially be periodic from day one. So we will move from assured short-hold tenancies, or ASTs as they're commonly known, to, I assume, assured tenancies, or maybe assured periodic tenancies. We don't know yet. So back to the tenants having to give 2 months notice. Now, there are some important caveats and there's important details on this to be aware of. Firstly, the notice as it is now has to be given in writing, and how that is served is usually detailed in the tenancy agreement. I keep saying at least 2 months notice. And this is because the notice must end at the end of a relevant rental period. So what that means, for example, if the tenancy runs from the 1st to the end of the month and the tenant gives written notice on, say, the 12th of February. Now, 2 months from the 12th of February is the 12th of April. However, the tenancy runs from the 1st to the end of the month. So in this case, the notice will expire on the 30th of April. Can't be part way through a tenancy period. I hope that makes sense. Now, while these changes offer clear benefits to tenants, they can pose potential challenges for landlords. As I've said before, fixed terms have provided predictability, giving landlords a clear idea of when a property might become vacant. Without them, planning ahead does become slightly more difficult. So under current legislation, unless an early termination is agreed with the landlord, there can really only be a maximum of 2 tenancies in a year. an initial 6-month fixed term, followed by another fixed term when the first tenant has vacated. However, with no fixed terms under the Renters' Rights Bill, the situation changes dramatically. So, for example, the first tenant could only stay for 3 months. The next tenant could then stay for 6 months. And then a third tenant moves in. So all of a sudden, there's potentially three tenancies in the year. Potentially increasing void periods and potentially increasing fees for the landlord. Now, if you take it to its extreme, if you're really unlucky, there could actually theoretically be 4 tenancies in a year if the first 3 tenancies only lasted 3 months each. Now, very doubtful, but theoretically still a possibility. Now, if you've got a really good memory, you may recall that July 2018, the Conservative government announced a formal consultation period on the proposal to introduce a minimum term of 3 years for all tenancies. How times have changed, a complete and utter 360. So while the abolition of fixed-term tenancies may feel like a dramatic shift, in fact it is, it could also be an opportunity to foster stronger, more stable relationships between landlords and tenants. Tenancy changeovers will need to be smooth and efficient to minimise void periods, and property and tenancy management will need to be top-notch, really, to encourage long-term tenants staying in the property for more than they are now.
Wow, there we have it. The end of fixed-term tenancies as we know it. I'd say, well, it is. I think this is the biggest part of the bill, and a lot of the provisions in the rest of the bill sort of move around the end of fixed-term tenancies. So, thoughts on that? Big one.
Thoughts on that?
There's always two sides, isn't there, to any coin? Positives, negatives. From a landlord's point of view, it's always going to be the financial side, and predicting within the year how many tenancies which you're not going to be able to really do. On the flip side of that, you've got to build that relationship with the tenant, and it all forms on the standard of that property, and keeping up with your fitness for human habitation, your AWABs, all the other parts to it. And if you've got and I always go back to, if you've got a good property being well looked after, the tenant's always going to stay longer. I can see some areas of the market being affected, possibly your room shares, that sort of thing, where you're probably going to have more of a transition between tenancies. But on family homes where tenants want that stability, then I think the tenancies will still be as lengthy as they are today.
Just want to point out something. We're not going to cover it in this because it is quite specific, but the student market is affected quite heavily with this provision. There's something called the Ground 4A for students, which changes the rules slightly. It's to do with sharers, HMOs, and tenancy agreements signed within 6 months. It's different to the model that we've got now, because a lot of the tenancies for students are signed well in advance. As I say, we're not going to talk about now because that is a bit more specific. So the big thing for me is the 1 day thing as well. It's the 1 day transition where everything changes over. So suddenly your 12-month fixed term that you signed in April to maybe a couple of months later just doesn't exist anymore.
No.
So
no.
Again, the same question I've asked in a previous podcast. What conversations are landlords bringing this up? Are they aware of what's going to change?
I actually don't hate the change. I don't. As I mentioned in the last podcast, maybe it's because I don't mind change, but I think it's a less common conversation than the Section 21s. Because I think people always think of the worst scenarios, and a Section 21 is only ever implemented if you want to get someone out of your property. So
I blame that on the media.
Yeah,
because I don't think it's as bad.
I think the conversations around fixed terms, again, if you are the sort of landlord that does a renewal every single year without fail, whether it's 6 month or 12 month, then it's something that you're going to have to get used to. I don't think it's the worst thing. I think the biggest thing is the financial implications. If you did watch the last podcast, Darren mentioned Let Simple at the end of that. If you haven't looked at it already, look at it. We haven't. I haven't been forced to sit and look over figures for anyone's pleasure, other than yours probably. But it is the financial side is obviously the most concerning, I would say, for, as mentioned in the video, potentially having 4 tenancies in 1 year.
Yeah.
If you're not a self-managing landlord, or to be honest, even if you are, because most of self-managing landlords don't do all of the initial paperwork themselves, and your agent isn't looking at a proactive way to actually change the traditional kind of landlord fees that they have got set up, that's something that you need to be thinking of. Because if you're paying, for example, $350 plus VAT for a setup fee every single time, 4 in a year, depending on the rent of your property, you're not really going to be too interested in continuing with renting it out, are you?
I probably don't want to push the 4 in a year, because, as I said,
it's
really,
an extreme
really will be
circumstance. But
exceptional. But
I think the saving grace, again, for our operating area, one of the main reasons that this, I believe, has been put in place is places like London, Manchester, where you've got people that aren't in permanent positions, you've got people changing jobs more, and for a lot of tenants it is restrictive having to sign up to either a 6 or a 12-month tenancy, because they don't know where they're going to be in 6 months' time. And early terminations, although you can't, the landlord can't unreasonably withhold consent, you'd be surprised how many agents actually don't know that. So I think there's two sides to it. I think that for tenants, I think, like you said, Simon, for families and things like that, and people that are happy to settle, which is most people in the Midlands, to be honest, maybe not so much in the West Midlands, but in the East Midlands more so, I think it's less concerning. I think more concerning, because they want that stability. They don't want to not know if they've got 12 months in a property or not. They don't want to know if they've got to move their child to school. They want that fixed term.
But it goes back to what we said in the first podcast about changing the way landlords reference to tenants and changing their sort of selection criteria in terms of, for example, in the new world, if we got an applicant from a tenant who says, I'm just moving as a short-term position because of a job
temporary
placement
role.
for 3 to 4 months, you'd be thinking red flags. And if a landlord then has somebody else applying for the property in a better financial position, or the reference or whatever, they're going to get alienated. And I think a lot of this bill is going to be alienating certain groups of tenants. They're
protected by the Equality Act, but not quite so protected by the Renters' Rights Bill.
wait till we talk about the banning of rents in advance, and see how many groups of people that alienates.
Again, I think the harsh reality now is that we're getting however many applications per property, aren't we? And I mean, the landlords nowadays generally have the luxury of having the pick of the bunch. But it's, as you've just mentioned, if you've got a couple that are moving in, they've got fixed term permanent jobs in the area that they're moving the properties in, and they've got 2 children that are both in school.
The reality is
that landlord then going to think, what, that's more of a long-term tenant than a single occupant that's moving in on their own, who's probably going to cause less wear and tear, but there's potential that they're going to give me notice in a month's time. So they're the things that are to consider, but I don't necessarily think it's going to be a bad thing. I agree with you, Simon. I think as long as you're starting the tenancy off on a good footing, you're maintaining that relationship, that landlord and tenant relationship, then I mean, I suppose it does link in with Section 21s. What's the reason that anyone's going to want to leave or evict, unless there's a change of circumstances?
I think, why would somebody want to leave? Okay, you might have a family, but I bang on about compliance and the maintenance of the property. And if you upkeep that and you keep it well, then they're less likely to want to move to another property.
Who likes moving house?
Nobody. There's financial implications with just moving, deposits, etc., and whatever else. So I keep banging on, but providing you maintain that property to a good standard and it's the size that they want and the area, then you're less likely to have that.
Do we think that there's certain property type. I'm thinking about a landlord maybe reviewing the portfolio or adding to the portfolio or refreshing the portfolio in some way.
Yeah.
Are there certain property types with a higher turnover of tenants that landlords may feel that in the future world they may want to steer clear of?
Yeah, I've had a couple of landlords already come to me, especially with the larger HMOs, which are naturally always transitional. You know, you'll probably get 6 months out of them, a year if you're lucky, and it's like buses, they all come at once and we end up with 3 rooms empty and whatever else. And to get your occupancy levels up to maximum capacities, always difficult on the larger shared properties. So those sorts of landlords have been coming to me saying, I might offload this one, look at 2 2-bed semis.
What about the non-sharing properties?
I think it's funny, actually, I hadn't thought about this, but I mean, we always say a 2-bed terrace is kind of your safe bet. But I mean, not that that's going to necessarily change, but reflecting now, if you're wanting to, attract families, then you may actually need to be considering a 3-bed.
Yeah.
I won't go into it too much because I know you'll tell me to be quiet, but we mentioned slightly decent home standards, and there's different aspects that are being changed, but the overcrowding laws, local authority enforcement is going to skyrocket. We've already seen some of it even before the renters' rights bill has come in, so they are being funded. So, it doesn't take much to overcrowd a 2-bed terrace as far as the council are concerned. So I suppose there's those things to consider, but I think apart from, like you said, the bigger HMOs, it's very similar advice to what we've always given is, you 2-bed terraces, 3-bed terraces, semis and things like that. They are attractive, and
but the dynamics
not going to change.
The dynamics been changing over the last few years anyway, in terms of what is the right type of house to rent out.
Yeah.
And you are finding more families. You are finding people. When it used to be a stopgap, and I'm talking a long time ago, I'm gonna rent for a year and then I'm gonna buy somewhere.
Yeah.
And that seems to have, all right, it still happens, but
it's diminished.
People are now making it their home.
Yeah.
I mean, I rent, so I own a letting agent and I rent my house. I don't see it as, because I'll be absolutely honest, where I rent, I couldn't afford to buy it.
Yeah.
So I'm quite happy doing that. And I think that dynamic has changed with a lot of people where they're now making it their permanent home.
I definitely think one positive, if you look at it from kind of a social aspect, is that the bill is moving with the times. So you have got a lot more jobs now. Obviously, marketing is massive. Media is massive in terms of job roles, and ordinarily, quite often, they are on kind of a more freelance basis. So for those situations, and the social media world and things like that, it helps probably coming from someone who was born in the late 90s. So I give probably that opinion probably from that point of view. So it is helpful for that. What it isn't helpful for, like I said, is we've had tenants saying, well, I want 12 months, and we're saying, look, I do want to pre-warn you, the landlord's agreed to 12 months, but potentially in July, you're going to go on to a periodic, and they're panicking. And that's the bit that I don't think is always considered.
No, there's going to be a point. I mean, I say being quite open about it. There is going to be a point in the next couple of months, and it all depends on when the bill becomes law. And I'll just explain that a little bit at the moment. That there's got to be a point where there's no point in renewing a fixed term tenancy. There's going to be no point, because you're going to get to a position where, and I'll have to use pretend dates, I suppose. So say the bill comes in on the 1st of July and you've got a fixed term tenancy coming up at the end of April. Previously, you'd renew for another 6 months, 12 months, and there'd be no point in doing that. You basically all you're doing is you're just getting a month out of it, because then you've got at the moment 30 days notice. It will be 2 months notice. So if you are being advised to, this is for landlords, if you are being advised to renew a tenancy, it really is you really got to think about at what point is it worth it. Now, just to explain the way the bill goes, it gets to, eventually, after going through the Parliament and Lords and all that type of thing, it will receive royal assent, which means King Charles says, yeah, quite happy with that, sign it off. Now, 2 things can happen there. it can either be made law straight away, immediately, or there's a period of time which is usually commonly 2 months. So royal assent, I think, will be possibly even the end of March, the way this bill's going through. And then you've got a period maybe of 2 months where it'll be end of May, 1st of June it comes in. Or they might just decide to bring it in straight away. We don't know. And that's where we're in a bit of a quandary, because some of the advice that we're asked to be given can't be given because we haven't got a date. And that's the sort of unknown at the moment.
I think it's, again, just making sure people are educated. I mean, as an agent, be very open and honest, we charge the same for a renewal, whether it's 6 months or 12 months. A lot of other agents don't. They'll charge you different amounts, obviously depending on, and they base it off management and everything like that. But I just think for landlords, those conversations that you're having with renewals, just bear in mind the bill, because what you don't want to be doing is sitting there agreeing to a 12-month thinking, oh, it's fine, I'm secure for the next 12 months.
You're giving people false hope.
Exactly.
Both your landlord and your tenant, you're giving them false hope.
To be honest, I mean, we're advising people now, and both parties still want 12 months. If both parties still want 12 months, I've got no issue in doing it for you.
No, I'm just giving the repercussions.
As long as you can make an informed decision
that's
based on the advice that we're giving, that's absolutely fine. But I do think just bear it in mind if you are agreeing. I mean, nothing's going to spoil, is it? I mean, it'll just change into a month-by-month tenancy, which is not the end of the world. But just bear in mind, if you're paying for your renewal, then just bear that in mind, that maybe you don't want to pay for your renewal and maybe you want to see what happens, or it's just something to consider. But it's really not the end of the world, but it's something that we spoke about, isn't it, in terms of at what point do we start saying to people, or being on it, more open with clients, and say, look, there is really no point in doing this fixed-term renewal at this point.
There's got to be a point. There's got to be a date where there's no point in doing it. The problem is we don't know when that date is, because we don't know when the bill's coming in. You've just got to be as informed as possible, and I think that's the really important thing.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's it on fixed term tenancies. The video is on our website if you want to review it and relook at it again. There's also, if you go on the website, there's a little form at the bottom of the website which has got all the videos that we've done on the Renters' Rights Bill, and it's basically ask a question. If you've got a question that you want to ask, then type it in. We'll reply individually by email, but we may also use that question in future Renters' Rights Bills as we get closer to the implementation date. I'm sure we'll talk about it some more. Last thing I want to say is we have created a brand new service, and he referred to it early on, called Let Simple, which we've created as a direct result of the Renters' Rights Bill coming in, which we think covers a lot of the major points of the bill in terms of helping landlords negotiate it, give a more predictable cash flow, predictable fees, and it also includes rent guarantee, which I'm sure you're aware is going to be massive moving forward. And makes our lives easier, so please take it out. Yeah, makes life a lot easier. Again, letsimple.co.uk, check it out, see what you think, give us a ring, anything you want to do, get in touch. And thanks for that, and we'll be back soon with yet another Renters' Rights Bill special. Thanks for watching.
Ciao.
Bye.